The
These are
change
the
in her
letters.
face was instant. Her grief hardened into
serious?
something sharper. Her shoulders
Who are they
stiffened.
from?
Her eyes narrowed, not with surprise, but with recognition. She knew exactly who I was. For a moment, no one moved. The murmurs around her faded as she walked toward me. Every step she took felt like a door closing. "Why are you here?"
Everyone
she
here
asked.
knows what
This
you
woman,
did.
she said, still staring at
Don't
me,
act
left
like
when I
you
was
didn't
11.
destroy this family.
A cold wave moved through my body. She walked out. Rachel continued, her voice shaking now. She disappeared. No calls. No birthday cards. No Christmas cards. Nothing. And now she wants to stand here and pretend she's grieving. I wanted to speak. God help me. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to say I called until your father changed the number. I wanted to say I came to your school and was escorted away. I wanted to say I wrote to you every week until my hands cramped and my heart gave out. But the church was full of people who had loved David's lie more than they would ever love my truth. And Rachel's grief was too raw. I could see it trembling beneath her anger. If I pushed the truth into her hands right there, she would only throw it back at me. So I stood still, and my silence made her hate me more. "You don't get to cry," she said. A tear had slipped down my cheek without my permission. I wiped it quickly. Rachel's mouth tightened. "You abandoned me. He stayed. He raised me. He showed up for every school play, every fever, every graduation. He was there when you weren't." Her words were knives, but what hurt most was knowing that in her world, they were true. David had stayed. David had smiled in photographs. David had taken her to school, signed her report cards, sat in the front row at graduations, and built his entire sainthood on the ashes of my motherhood. "Sorry," I whispered. Rachel's eyes flashed. That's all, no. It was not all. It was the smallest part of a truth too large to fit inside a church aisle. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said. "You didn't hurt me," she replied. "You erased me." I felt my breath catch. Behind Rachel, an elderly woman in the second row slowly stood. For a second, I did not recognize her. Then she turned her face slightly toward the light from the stained glass window. Helen Morris, our old neighbor. She was much thinner now, her once dark hair turned white, her back bent with age. But her eyes were the same gentle, watchful, carrying more than they said. She looked at me, and I saw recognition there. Not judgment, not pity. Recognition. Rachel followed my gaze and glanced back. "Mrs. Morris, please sit down. This isn't your concern." Helen's lips parted as if she wanted to say something. I gave the smallest shake of my head. "Not here. Not yet." Helen lowered herself back into the pew, but her eyes remained on me. The organ began playing softly, signaling that the service was about to start. People returned to their seats, though many continued stealing glances at me. Rachel stayed in front of me for one more moment. "You should leave," she said. I looked past her at David's casket. I had not come because I loved him. I had come because his death meant the wall he built might finally crack. "I'll sit in the back," I said. "I won't disturb anyone." "You already have." Then she turned and walked away. Olivia looked at me before following her mother. Her eyes were curious, not cruel. That small difference almost undid me. I took a seat in the last pew alone. The service began. The pastor spoke of David's kindness, his strength, his loyalty to family. Every sentence felt like another stone laid over the truth. People nodded. Some cried. Rachel sat in the front row with her head bowed, her daughter's hand wrapped around hers. I stared at the back of Rachel's head and remembered braiding her hair before school. I remembered the way she used to ask me to sing while she fell asleep, I remembered the night I stood outside our own home in the rain, listening to her cry from upstairs, while David told me through the locked door that if I loved her, I would go. A hymn rose through the church. I did not sing. I could barely breathe. When the service ended, I waited until most people had gone outside. I did not want another scene. I stood slowly gripping the pew for support. That was when Helen Morris appeared beside me. "Laura," she whispered. My name and her voice nearly brought me to my knees. "Helen." Her eyes filled with tears. "I wondered if you would come. I wasn't sure I should. You had every right." I shook my head. "Rachel doesn't believe that." Helen looked toward the church doors where Rachel was speaking with guests. "She doesn't know what he did." "No," I said. "She doesn't." Helen lowered her voice. "There are things in that house, Laura. Things he never threw away." My heart began to pound. "What things?" Helen glanced toward Rachel again. "Letters." The word moved through me like lightning. I gripped my purse tighter. "What do you know? I saw them once," she said. "Years ago. A box in the attic. Your handwriting. Dozens of envelopes." The church tilted around me. For 32 years, I had imagined my letters destroyed, burned, tossed in the trash, lost forever like everything else David took from me. But they had survived. Somewhere in that house, my voice was still waiting for my daughter. Before I could ask more, Rachel appeared at the end of the moor. Rachel appeared at the end of the aisle. Her face hardened when she saw Helen beside me. "What are you two talking about?" she asked. Helen straightened, fragile but firm. "Something why you should have heard a long time ago, I'll." Her face hardened when she saw Helen beside me. "What are you two talking about?" she asked. Helen straightened, fragile but firm. "Something you should have heard a long time ago." Rachel frowned. "Not doing this today." "No," I said quietly. "Not today." Rachel looked at me with open suspicion. "Then stay away from my family." My family. The words hurt, but I accepted them. "I'll be at the Ashford Inn until Monday," I said, "if you ever want to talk." "I won't." She walked away again. But this time, Olivia looked back. And this time, Helen did not sit down. As I stepped outside into the cold Ohio afternoon, the church bells began to ring. People gathered around David's casket, praising a man they thought they knew. Rachel stood among them, grieving the father who had raised her. I stood alone near the sidewalk, holding the old photograph in my purse. For the first time in 32 years, I allowed myself to believe that the truth had not died with him. It was hidden. It was waiting. And somehow, my daughter was closer to it than she had ever been. Before David Carter became the respected widower, everyone praised at his funeral. He was the young man who made me believe I had been chosen. I met him in the spring of 1981 at a small community fundraiser in Columbus. I was 24, working as a receptionist at a pediatric clinic, saving money for nursing school, and still naive enough to believe charm was the same thing as kindness. David was 29. He owned a small insurance office, then nothing grand, but he carried himself like a man already standing in a bigger future. He wore pressed shirts, remembered people's names, and had a way of making everyone in a room feel as if they mattered. When he asked me to dance that night, I felt embarrassed by how quickly I said yes. "You have a gentle face," he told me while we moved slowly under paper lanterns. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It is," he said. "The world needs gentle people." That was how he began, with tenderness. He brought flowers to the clinic. He opened car doors. He asked about my mother's arthritis and remembered the names of my coworkers. When my father warned me that David seemed too polished, I thought he was just being protective. By Christmas, David had proposed. By the next summer, I was Mrs. Laura Carter. At first, marriage felt like safety. David bought a small white house on Maple Ridge Drive with green shutters and a backyard big enough for a swing set someday. I planted tulips along the walkway. He painted the front porch himself and kissed my cheek whenever neighbors walked by. Everyone said I was lucky. For a while, I believed them. Then the little corrections began. Not yelling, not at first, just small things. That dress is a little too bright for dinner with my clients. You talk too much when you're nervous. Your sister asks too many questions. Maybe don't tell her everything. I don't like that doctor at your clinic looking at you that way. Each comment came wrapped in concern. He would touch my shoulder, lower his voice, and make it sound as if he was protecting me from embarrassment, gossip, or danger. I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted peace in our home. So I changed the dress. I spoke less at dinners. I stopped telling my sister Karen when David and I argued. I brushed off the tight feeling in my chest. When Rachel was born, I thought motherhood would soften him. For a few weeks it did. David cried when he held her the first time. Real tears. He looked down at her tiny face and whispered, "My girl." I remember watching him from the hospital bed, exhausted and full of hope, thinking that whatever was wrong between us might heal now. But Rachel did not soften David. She gave him something new to control. He decided who visited. He decided when my mother could hold her. He decided which pediatrician we used, even though I worked at a clinic and knew perfectly good doctors. If Rachel cried too long, he blamed me. If I looked tired, he said I was becoming unstable. If I asked for help, he said other women handled motherhood with more grace. Still, to the outside world, he was perfect. At church, he held Rachel on his hip and let older ladies fuss over him. At least one father knows how to show up, they would say. He would smile modestly as if fatherhood had simply revealed his noble soul. At home, he counted how much formula I used and asked why I needed money for groceries twice in 1 week. I did not have my own bank account after our first year of marriage. David said it made sense to combine finances. Then he said it made sense for him to manage them because he was better with numbers. When I wanted to return to work part-time after Rachel turned 3, he looked at me as though I had insulted him. "My wife does not need to answer phones for a living," he said. "It's not just answering phones. I liked working there." "You liked attention," he replied. That was the first time I felt afraid of him. Not because he shouted, because he sounded so certain. After that, my world became smaller. My car was unreliable, so he sold it and said we would share his. But sharing meant asking permission. If I wanted to visit Karen, he needed to know why. If I wanted to take Rachel to the library, he asked what was wrong with the books at home. If I spent too long talking to Helen Morris over the fence, he would later ask what private family matters I had been discussing. Helen noticed more than most people. She lived next door with her husband Frank, a retired postal worker who spent every afternoon trimming hedges that never needed trimming. Helen had kind eyes and the rare gift of asking questions without making you feel trapped. One summer evening when Rachel was 6, Helen found me standing in the backyard with a basket of wet laundry in my arms, crying silently. She did not rush over. She did not embarrass me. She simply said from her side of the fence, "Honey, do you need a cup of coffee?" I almost said no. Instead, I nodded. That cup of coffee became one of the few honest moments I had in those years. Sitting in Helen's kitchen while Rachel colored at the table, I admitted that David did not like me seeing my family. I admitted that I had started hiding small amounts of cash in an old recipe tin. I admitted that sometimes I felt less like a wife and more like a guest who could be thrown out at any moment. Helen listened quietly. Then she said, "Laura, men like David don't need to hit walls to make a prison." I never forgot that sentence, but I still stayed. I stayed because Rachel loved her room with the yellow curtains. I stayed because she had friends at school. I stayed because David never acted cruel when anyone else was watching, and I feared no one would believe me. I stayed because every time I considered leaving, he seemed to sense it. And then he would become kind again. He would bring home roses. He would make pancakes on Sunday morning. He would kiss Rachel on the forehead and tell me, "See, we're a beautiful family when you don't make things difficult." That was the trap. He made peace feel like something I had to earn. By the time Rachel turned 10, she had learned to read the weather in our house. She knew when to stay quiet. She knew when to run upstairs with her dolls. She knew that if Daddy's voice got too calm, Mommy's face would go pale. Once she asked me while I was folding towels, "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" I knelt in front of her immediately. "No, baby. Neve R." "Then why is Daddy mad all the time?" Once she asked me while I was folding towels. "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" I knelt in front of her immediately. "No, baby. Never." "Then why is Daddy mad all the time?" I pulled her into my arms and held her so tightly she squirmed. I wanted to tell her the truth, but she was only a child. So I said the thing mothers say when they are trying to protect innocence. Grown-ups worry about things sometimes. She looked at me with those wide brown eyes. "Are you going to leave?" My whole body went cold. "No," I whispered. "I would never leave you." And I meant it. With every piece of my soul, I meant it. But every piece of my soul, I meant it. But David was standing in the hallway. I did not see him until Rachel ran back to her room. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "That was dramatic," he said. I stood slowly. "She scared David." David was standing in the hallway. I did not see him until Rachel ran back to her room. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "That was dramatic," he said. I stood slowly. "She scared David. She's scared because you make yourself look like a victim. That isn't fair." His eyes hardened. "Be very careful, Laura." It was not a shout. It was worse. It was a warning. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, and understood something I had avoided for years. David did not simply want to control our marriage. He wanted to control the story. He wanted Rachel to see him as the steady one, and me as the emotional one, the weak one, the problem. And if I ever tried to leave, he would make sure the world believed his version first. I turned my face toward the dark window and silently promised my daughter again, "I will not abandon you. I will find a way to protect us both." But I did not know then that David had already begun preparing for the day he would turn my own child against me. I did not know that the man sleeping beside me was not afraid of losing his family. He was afraid of losing control. And men like David did not surrender control. They punished anyone who tried to take it back. The night David forced me out of our home began with a missing receipt. That is how small the beginning looked. A grocery receipt. I had taken Rachel to the store after school because she needed poster board for a science project. She wanted to build a model of the solar system, and she had spent the whole ride there naming the planets in order, tapping each one on her fingers. Mercury, Venus, Earth. Mars, she kept repeating from the back seat of David's car, because by then, I no longer had one of my own. At the store, I bought the poster board, a pack of markers, 2 apples, bread milk, and a small bag of chocolate kisses, because Rachel had done well on her spelling test. I remember that bag of candy more clearly than I remember many larger things in my life, because later that night, David held it up between 2 fingers, as if it were evidence of a crime. "This wasn't on the list," he said. We were standing in the kitchen. Rachel was upstairs, supposed to be getting ready for bed, though I knew she was probably still arranging her markers by color. "It was just candy," I said. "She got a perfect score on her spelling test." David looked at the receipt again. "And the apples, we needed fruit. I asked you to get milk bread and poster board." His voice was calm. That was always when I knew I was in danger. I dried my hands on a dish towel. "David, it was less than $4 extra." He lifted his eyes to mine. "It is not about $4. No, I thought. It never was." He stepped closer. "It is about respect. It is about you making decisions behind my back. I bought apples. You used my car, my money, and my time to do whatever you wanted." Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not bravely, just enough for the truth to escape before fear could stop it. "I am your wife, David, not your employee." The room went very still. I knew immediately I had made a mistake. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. A curtain dropped. The man who smiled at church, who shook hands with neighbors, who helped elderly women carry groceries, vanished completely. "What did you say?" I should have apologized. I had done it many times before. I had swallowed my dignity so often it felt normal. But that night, maybe because Rachel had asked me only 2 days, because Rachel had asked me only 2 days earlier if I was sad because of her, maybe because I had seen my own reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized myself, I did not apologize. I said, "Am your wife earlier if I was sad because of her, maybe because I had seen my own reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized myself. I did not apologize. I said, I'm your wife." I repeated, though my voice shook. "And I can't keep living like this." David slowly folded the receipt and placed it on the kitchen table. What afraid? For the first time in years, I said the word out loud. Afraid. It seemed to hang between us like smoke. It seemed to hang between us like smoke. Above us, a floorboard creaked. Rachel. David heard it too. His eyes flicked toward the ceiling, then back to me. His voice softened, but not with kindness. "You want to perform for her now?" Above us, a floorboard creaked. Rachel. David heard it too. His eyes flicked toward the ceiling, then back to me. His voice softened, but not with kindness. "You want to perform for her now?" "No. I want her to stop thinking this is normal." A faint smile appeared on his face. "That is interesting," he said, "because I have been thinking the same thing." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I have watched you become unstable for years." I stared at him. "You cry for no reason," he continued. "You hide money. You tell neighbors private things. You turn ordinary disagreements into tragedies. And now you are saying you are afraid of me, because I am." His smile faded. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Then maybe you should leave." I thought I had misheard him. "What? If you are so afraid, Laura, leave." I looked toward the stairs. Rachel is upstairs. She stays here. The words struck me so hard I could not breathe. No. Yes. No, David. I will not leave without my daughter. He moved past me toward the hallway. I followed him, panic rising in my throat. David, stop. He reached the bottom of the stairs and called up Rachel. Stay in your room. Her small voice came from above. Daddy? Stay in your room. I pushed past him and started up the stairs. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to leave a bruise. Never hard enough for proof. Let go of me. You are not going up there while you are acting like this. She's scared. She is scared because of you. I tried to pull free. Rachel? Her bedroom door opened at the top of the stairs. She stood there in pink pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Mommy! The sight of her broke something open in me. It's okay, baby, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Go back in your room for a minute. But she saw David holding my wrist. Her face changed. Let Mommy go. David's grip loosened instantly because even then he understood how to manage appearances. He looked up at her and smiled gently. Sweetheart, your mother is upset. I'm helping her calm down. I'm not upset, I said. Rachel, get your shoes. David turned toward me. The air changed again. I had crossed a line he had drawn years ago, one I had never seen clearly until that moment. Rachel looked between us. Why? Get your shoes, I repeated. We're going to Aunt Karen's. David laughed softly. It was the worst sound I had ever heard. You are not taking my daughter anywhere. Our daughter. His face hardened. Not tonight. I ran up the stairs. He came after me. Rachel began to cry. Everything became motion. Then, my hand reaching for Rachel. David stepping between us. Rachel sobbing into her rabbit. Me telling her to come to me. David telling her not to move. I remember the hallway light flickering. I remember the smell of lemon cleaner from the kitchen. I remember Rachel's bare feet on the carpet. I reached her bedroom door first and pulled her into my arms. For 3 seconds, I had her. 3 seconds. Her little body shook against mine. She whispered, Mommy, don't go. I'm not going anywhere without you, I said. David stood in the doorway. His voice was low. If you walk out that door with her, I will call the police and tell them you're having a breakdown. I stared at him over Rachel's head. He continued, I will tell them you threatened to take her across state lines. I will tell them you have been hiding money and acting paranoid. I will call your sister and tell her you need help. I will call the clinic where you used to work. I will call everyone. You're lying, and they will believe me. I hated him then, not the confused, wounded hatred of a bad argument, something deeper. A hatred born from finally seeing the cage and the man who had built it bar by bar. Rachel clung tighter to me. Mommy, I kissed her hair. Listen to me, baby. I love you more than anything in this world. David said, do not put this on her. I ignored him. No matter what anyone tells you, remember that. Rachel clung tighter to me. Mommy, I kissed her hair. Listen to me, baby. I love you more than anything in this world. David said, do not put this on her. I ignored him. No matter what anyone tells you, remember that. Rachel cried harder. Where are you going? I'm not leaving you. David stepped closer. Enough. He took Rachel by the shoulders, not roughly but firmly, and pulled her away from me. She screamed. That scream still wakes me some nights. I reached for her, but David blocked me with his body and pointed toward the stairs. Go pack a bag, he said. No. He leaned close enough that only I could hear. If you stay, I will make sure she watches the police drag you out. I looked at Rachel. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. And in that moment, I understood the cruelty of his trap. If I fought, Rachel would remember me being taken away screaming. If I stayed, he would escalate until she stood in the middle of something no child should witness. If I left for the night, maybe I could return with Karen, with a lawyer, with someone who could help me. I made the worst choice of my life because it seemed in that moment like the only way to protect her from more terror. I packed one suitcase. David stood in the doorway the entire time. I put in 2 dresses, a sweater, underclothes, my hairbrush, and the small recipe tin where I had hidden $87 in cash. My hands shook so badly I could barely close the zipper. Rachel sat on her bed, sobbing into her stuffed rabbit. I knelt in front of her. David said, "Do not make promises you cannot keep." I looked at my daughter and made one anyway. "I will come back for you," I whispered. She nodded, tears shining on her cheeks. "Tomorrow, as soon as I can." David's shadow fell over us. I kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then both of her tiny hands. "I love you, Rachel. I love you. I love you." Those were the last words I said to my daughter inside that house. David walked me downstairs. He opened the front door. Rain was falling. Of course it was raining. In memories like mine, the weather always seems too dramatic to be real. But it was. Cold October rain blew across the porch and soaked my shoes before I had even stepped outside. I turned back once. Rachel was at the top of the stairs. David had one hand on the banister, blocking her from coming down. "Mommy!" she cried. I stepped toward her. David's voice cut through the hall. "Leave now, Laura." I looked at my daughter's face, trying to memorize every inch of it. Then I walked out with my suitcase. The door closed behind me. I stood on the porch in the rain and waited for him to lock it. Click. That sound divided my life into before and after. I went first to Karen's apartment, but she was out of town visiting our mother. I did not have a key. I used a payphone outside a gas station to call the house. David answered on the first ring. "Let me talk to Rachel," I said. "No, I'm coming back tomorrow. If you come near this house without my permission, I will call the police. She is my daughter. She is safe from you." Then he hung up. I called again. No answer. I called 7 times that night. By morning, the phone had been disconnected. Not changed. Disconnected. David had started erasing me before I even understood I was gone. And Rachel, my sweet little girl upstairs, with her rabbit and her yellow curtains, woke up in a house where her father was already preparing the lie that would steal 32 years from us both. I did not go to Pittsburgh because I wanted a new life. I went because it was the only place where David did not know every street, every neighbor, every person who might recognize my face and call him before I could even breathe. My sister Karen came home the next afternoon and found me sitting on the floor outside her apartment door, soaked from the rain, holding my suitcase like a woman waiting for a train that would never arrive. When she saw me, she dropped her purse and ran down the hallway. "Laura." "My God, what happened?" I tried to answer, but the only sound that came out of me was Rachel's name. Karen took me inside, wrapped me in towels, made tea I could not drink, and listened as I told her everything in broken pieces. The argument, the stairs, David's threats, Rachel crying at the top of the hallway, the disconnected phone. Karen wanted to drive straight to the house. I wanted that too. But when we arrived at Maple Ridge Drive that evening, David was ready. 2 police cars were parked in front of the house. My knees nearly gave out before I even opened the car door. David stood on the porch wearing a cardigan, calm as a Sunday school teacher. Beside him stood Rachel in a blue sweater holding the same stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were swollen from crying. I ran toward her. "Rachel!" One officer stepped in front of me. "Ma'am, we need you to stay back." "That's my daughter." David put a hand on Rachel's shoulder. She flinched just slightly, but I saw it. "Laura," he said sadly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Please don't make this harder on her. Let me talk to her." The officer looked at me with a practiced expression, not cruel, but already cautious. "Mr. Carter says there was an incident last night." "There was," I said. "He threw me out." David sighed. "She left voluntarily after becoming very upset." "That is a lie." Karen stepped forward. "Officer, my sister is not dangerous. Her husband is manipulating Karen." David interrupted, his voice still calm. "I understand you want to protect her, but she needs help. Needs help." Those two words became the first bricks in the wall he built around me. Rachel looked at me from behind the officer. "Mommy." I started crying the moment she said it. David leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Her face changed. She took one small step backward. I did not know then what he had said. Years later, I would imagine it 1,000 ways. Maybe he told her I was sick. Maybe he said I would take her away and never let her see him. Maybe he said crying women could be dangerous. Whatever the words were, they worked. The officer told me I could not enter the house that night. He advised me to cool down, contact an attorney, and avoid confrontation for Rachel's sake. For Rachel's sake. That phrase would follow me like a curse. I spent the next week sleeping on Karen's couch, calling lawyers from the phone book, and trying to get anyone to understand that I had not abandoned my child. Most wanted retainers I could not afford. Some spoke to me with pity. One asked if I had ever been treated for depression. Another asked why I left the house if I was not unstable. I did not have a good answer that sounded strong, because the truth sounded weak. I left because he threatened me. I left because my daughter was screaming. I left because I thought I could come back with help. I left because I did not understand that men like David do not simply win arguments. They prepare evidence. 2 weeks later, Karen drove me to Pittsburgh, where our cousin had a friend who owned a small boarding house and needed a housekeeper. I told myself it would be temporary. I told myself I would save money, hire a better attorney, and return for Rachel with papers in my hands instead of panic in my voice. The boarding house was on a narrow street lined with brick buildings and tired porches. My room was on the 3rd floor, just large enough for a bed, a dresser, and a desk pushed under a window that rattled whenever trucks passed below. That desk became my lifeline. The first night there, I sat down with a yellow legal pad and wrote my daughter a letter. My dearest Rachel, I have written those 3 words so many times that even now, decades later, my hand remembers the shape of them. I told her I was safe. I told her I had not left because I stopped loving her. I told her that grown-up problems were complicated, but a mother's love was not. I told her I would keep trying to see her. I did not write ugly things about David. That may sound foolish now. Maybe I should have told her everything plainly. Maybe I should have written, "Your father is lying. Your father is keeping me from you. Your father frightened me and then used my fear against me." But she was 11. I could not bring myself to put that poison in her hands. So I wrote love instead. I wrote about the way she used to hum while brushing her hair. I wrote about the yellow curtains in her bedroom. I wrote about how proud I was that she could name all the planets. I told her that every night before I slept, I pictured kissing her forehead. Then I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, wrote her name across the front, and mailed it to Maple Ridge Drive. For 3 days, I lived on hope. Every time the boarding house phone rang, my heart jumped. Every time the mail arrived, I ran downstairs. I imagined Rachel reading my letter under her blanket with a flashlight. I imagined her asking David why he had said I did not care. I imagined the truth beginning to loosen its way through the cracks. No reply came. I wrote again the next week. Then again the week after that. Soon, Wednesday became letter day. I cleaned rooms, changed sheets, scrubbed bathrooms, served coffee to traveling salesmen and tired nurses, and counted tips in a jar beside my bed. On Wednesdays, no matter how exhausted I was, I sat at that desk and wrote to Rachel. I wrote when my hands smelled of bleach. I wrote when I had a fever. I wrote after receiving court papers that made me feel like my own life had been translated into a language designed to make me look guilty. I wrote through every season. In winter, I told her Pittsburgh looked beautiful under snow, though I spent most mornings salting icy steps before sunrise. In spring, I pressed a small dried violet between two sheets of paper and told her it reminded me of the flowers she used to pick from Helen's yard. In summer, I wrote about the 4th of July fireworks over the river and how I wondered if she still covered her ears during the loud ones. In fall, I wrote about pumpkin cinnamon candles and the Halloween costume we never got to make together. No reply. Not one. But I kept writing. Eventually, I hired Michael Reed, a young attorney with tired eyes and a small office above a pharmacy. He was not the most expensive lawyer in Pittsburgh, but he was the first person who listened to me without glancing at the clock. He read the police report David had filed. He read the statement claiming I had threatened to remove Rachel from the state. He read notes from David describing me as emotionally unpredictable. When he finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "your husband is building a custody case before there is even a formal custody case." "I know. Do you have witnesses?" "My sister. Maybe our neighbor Helen. Do you have medical records? Proof of abuse? Threatening letters? Anything documented?" I shook my head. Because David's cruelty did not leave paperwork. Michael leaned back. "Then we start documenting now." So we did. Every letter I sent to Rachel I copied by hand before mailing. Michael told me to keep dates, keep envelopes, keep receipts if possible. If I called and the number was disconnected, write it down. If I went to Columbus and was denied access, write it down. If David sent a message through someone else, write it down. I became a woman made of notes. I kept a notebook in my purse and another beside my bed. I wrote down times, names, places, exact words. I saved postal receipts in a shoebox. I marked every birthday, every holiday, every attempt. Some nights, I felt strong. Other nights, I lay on the boarding house bed with Rachel's photograph against my chest and begged God to keep her heart from turning against me. But time is dangerous when lies are repeated inside a child's home. Months passed, then a year, then 2. My letters became longer because my life without Rachel became lonelier. I wrote about small things because small things were all I had to give her. I told her when I learned to make peach cobbler from a woman named Mrs. Bennett who rented the room below mine. I told her when I found work at a diner on Liberty Avenue. I told her when I finally bought an old blue Ford with rust near the back tire because I wanted her to know her mother was still trying to stand. Every birthday letter began the same way. My beautiful Rachel, today, I remember the morning you were born. Every Christmas letter ended the same way. Wherever you are in this house tonight, please know my love has found you. I believed that. I had to believe that. Then one cold December afternoon, nearly 3 years after I left, a letter came back. Return to sender. I stood in the boarding house hallway staring at the envelope. My handwriting was on the front. Rachel's name was there. The red postal stamp cut across it like a wound. For a moment, I could not move. Then I ran upstairs, opened my desk drawer, and pulled out the copies of every letter I had ever sent. They were stacked neatly tied with a ribbon because I had needed some small ceremony to keep from falling apart. I placed the returned envelope on top. That night, I wrote another letter. My dearest Rachel, today, one of my letters came back to me. I do not know why. I do not know whether the others reached you, but I will keep writing because even if my words never find your hands, they are still true. I cried so hard, the ink blurred. Still, I finished it. Still, I mailed it. Because a mother does not stop loving her child just because someone blocks the road between them. She learns to send love anyway, even into silence, even into darkness, even when no answer ever comes. While I was writing letters from a small desk in Pittsburgh, David was writing a different story inside our old house. His story had no rain in it, no locked door, no frightened child at the top of the stairs, no mother standing in a gas station with wet shoes begging through a payphone just to hear her daughter breathe. In David's version, I had simply left. That was the first lie Rachel learned. She chose herself, he told her. I did not know those exact words until many years later, but I could feel them reaching me through the silence. Every unanswered letter told me something was being planted in my daughter's heart, and every month that passed gave the roots more time to grow. Rachel was 11 when I left, old enough to remember my voice, young enough to believe the adult who controlled the house. David understood that perfectly. He did not tell her the whole lie at once. That would have been too risky. Rachel would have cried too hard. She would have asked too many questions. She would have remembered too much. So he fed it to her slowly. At first, he acted wounded. According to Helen, who watched from next door, David kept the curtains open for weeks after I left. He made sure neighbors saw him walking Rachel to the bus stop with one hand on her shoulder, his face pale, his tie slightly loose, like a man bravely holding his home together. He took casseroles from church ladies and lowered his eyes when they said, "We're praying for you." He let people believe what they wanted before he confirmed it. That was David's gift. He never had to shout a lie when he could invite others to whisper it for him. Rachel asked about me every day at first. Helen told me that much years later. Where is Mommy? When is Mommy coming back? Can I call Mommy? David's answers changed with time. At first, your mother needs rest. Then your mother is confused. Then your mother made choices that hurt this family. And finally, the lie that became the foundation of Rachel's childhood. Your mother left because she wanted another life. Another life, as if I had stepped out of motherhood the way someone removes an old coat. I did not know the details then, but there were signs. The first Christmas after I was forced out, I mailed Rachel a package. Inside was a red scarf I had knitted badly, a paperback copy of Little Women, and a letter sealed in a silver envelope. I stood in line at the post office for nearly an hour, holding that box against my chest like it contained my own heart. 2 weeks later, it came back. Refused, not undeliverable, not wrong address. Refused. I sat on the floor of my room and stared at the stamped word until it blurred. Refused by whom Rachel David. A stranger at the door. I wanted to believe Rachel never saw it. I needed to believe that, because if she had refused my package herself, then the damage was already deeper than I could survive. That night, I called Michael Reed. They sent it back, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Keep the box. Don't open it. Save it exactly as it is. Michael. She thinks I forgot Christmas. I know. His voice was gentle, but gentleness did not fix anything. In Columbus, David created new traditions. He took Rachel to the Christmas Eve candlelight service and made sure they sat in the front pew. He baked cookies badly and laughed about it. He bought her a bicycle with a red bow and told everyone, "I'm trying to be both parents now." Both parents. People praised him for that. Rachel heard them. Children learn not only from what they are told, but from what the room rewards. Every time someone said, "Your father is such a good man," Rachel's memory of me grew a little dimmer. Every time someone sighed and said, "Some women just aren't made for motherhood," another piece of the truth was buried. By spring, David had removed most of my things from the house. Not all at once. That would have frightened Rachel. He began with my clothes. He told her I had asked him to donate them. Then my books. Then the framed photograph of me holding Rachel as a baby. Then the yellow mug I used every morning. Then the sewing basket beside the couch. He erased me politely, efficiently, like dusting a shelf. But he made one mistake. He did not throw away the letters. At least, not all of them. I have asked myself why 1,000 times. Why keep them? Why hide my voice instead of destroying it? Maybe David liked evidence of his own power. Maybe he wanted proof that he had controlled not only my presence, but my absence. Maybe he planned to use the letters one day twisted into some new version of the truth. Or maybe somewhere deep inside him, even he feared burning a mother's love. Whatever the reason, the letter survived. But Rachel did not know that. Rachel only knew what David allowed her to know. When she turned 12, I sent a birthday card with a small pressed violet taped inside. It did not come back. That gave me hope. I imagined her opening it. I imagined her touching the flower. I imagined her hiding the card in a drawer. But on that same birthday, David hosted a party in the backyard with balloons, a chocolate cake, and half her class from school. Helen watched from her kitchen window. Rachel laughed that day, Helen told me. She wore a blue dress. She blew out candles. David stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders, smiling for photographs. Later, after the guests left, Helen saw Rachel sitting alone on the back steps. David came out and sat beside her. Helen could not hear everything, but she heard enough. "She didn't call sweetheart," David said. Rachel said something Helen could not catch. Then David replied, "Some people are not capable of loving the way we need them to." I wish I had not imagined that scene so often. My little girl with cake still on her plate, waiting for a call I had tried to make. Because I did call. I called 3 times that day. The number was no longer listed. I mailed a card. David hid it. Then he sat beside our daughter and used the silence he created as proof against me. That was the cruelty of it. He did not merely keep me away. He made my absence speak. By the time Rachel entered high school, people had stopped asking about me. David's version had become accepted family history. I was the woman who walked out, the unstable wife, the selfish mother, the shadow no one mentioned at dinner. And Rachel, my bright little girl who once begged me not to go, learned to survive by hating me. I cannot even blame her for that. Hate is easier for a child than confusion. If your mother disappears and everyone around you says she chose to disappear, hatred gives you something solid to hold. It turns heartbreak into armor. It lets you say, "I don't need her," before anyone can see how badly you do. I still wrote. Every birthday, every Christmas, every first day of school. Sometimes I wrote ordinary letters on Wednesday nights. Sometimes I wrote pages I never mailed because Michael told me not to overwhelm the record. Still, I copied everything and saved it. I wrote when Rachel would have been learning to drive. My dearest Rachel, if you are nervous behind the wheel, remember to breathe before you turn the key. I wrote when she would have been applying for college. My beautiful girl, wherever you go, I hope you choose a place that makes your mind feel wide open. I wrote when she graduated high school, though I was not invited and did not know the date until Helen quietly mailed me a newspaper clipping. Rachel Carter, honors graduate. In the small black and white photo, she stood beside David, holding a bouquet. She looked so grown, so beautiful, so far away from me, that I pressed the clipping to my mouth and made a sound I had never heard from myself before. That night, I wrote the longest letter of all. I told her I was proud. I told her I remembered teaching her to write the letter R. I told her that no locked door, no courtroom, no lie, no distance could make me stop being her mother. I mailed it. No reply came. Years passed that way. David built a life on performance. Rachel built a heart around a wound. And I lived in Pittsburgh with copies of letters stacked in boxes, loving a daughter who had been taught to see my love as abandonment. But lies, no matter how carefully kept, have one weakness. They need silence to survive, and David had hidden my letters inside his own house. One day, long after he thought the story was settled forever, Rachel would find them. And for the first time, my daughter would hear my voice without his standing between us. The first time I went back to Rachel's school, I wore my best blue dress and carried a folder full of papers I barely understood. Michael Reed had helped me prepare them. There was a petition for visitation copies of my letters notes about the disconnected phone and a short statement explaining that I had never intended to leave my daughter behind. I read that statement so many times on the bus from Pittsburgh to Columbus that the words began to blur. I did not abandon my child. I did not abandon my child. I did not abandon my child. By the time I reached Columbus, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on a bench outside the Greyhound station and breathe into a paper napkin. Karen met me there. She hugged me hard and said, "We're going to get her back." I wanted to believe her. Maple Ridge Elementary sat behind a row of oak trees with a red brick entrance and a flagpole near the front steps. I had packed Rachel's lunches for that school. I had stood in that hallway for parent-teacher nights. I had once helped decorate her classroom with paper leaves for Thanksgiving. Now I stood outside like a stranger. The final bell rang at 3 o'clock. Children poured through the doors, laughing, shouting, dragging backpacks behind them. My heart beat so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Then I saw Rachel. She was wearing a green jacket and carrying a purple backpack. Her hair was longer than when I had last held her. She looked thinner, older, as if a whole season had passed across her face. "Rachel!" I called. She stopped. For one beautiful second, her face opened. "Mommy!" I started toward her. Then the principal stepped between us. "Mrs. Carter." My feet froze. He was a tall man with silver glasses and a careful expression. I had met him twice before, when David and I were still together. Back then, he had smiled at me and called me Rachel's mother. Now he looked at me as if I were a problem he had been warned about. "I need you to come with me," he said. "I just want to see my daughter." Rachel stood behind him, confused, frightened. The principal lowered his voice. "Mr. Carter informed us there is an active custody concern. There is no order saying I can't see her. Mrs. Carter, please don't make this difficult." There it was again. That polite sentence people use when they have already decided your pain is inconvenient. Karen stepped forward. "She is Rachel's mother, I understand," he said, "but the school must prioritize the child's safety." Safety. That word nearly knocked me backward. I looked past him at Rachel. "Baby, I love you." Her eyes filled with tears. The principal turned and motioned to a teacher. "Please take Rachel inside." "No," I said. "Please, just 1 minute." Rachel began to cry. "Mommy." I moved toward her without thinking. A hand closed around my arm. Not David's this time. A police officer. Someone had called before I even arrived, or maybe David had arranged it that way. I never knew. The officer was not cruel, but he was firm. He told me I needed to leave school property. I kept saying, "That's my daughter." He kept saying, "Ma'am, I understand." But he did not understand. No one understands a mother being treated like a danger to the child she once rocked through fevers. Rachel disappeared through the school doors. The last thing I saw was her face through the glass, wet with tears, looking back at me, as if she did not know whether to run toward me or away from me. Karen drove me to Michael's office that evening. I sat across from him with my folder in my lap and a shame so heavy I could barely lift my head. "They called the police," I said. Michael's jaw tightened. "Did they arrest you?" "No." "Good. We document it. I scared her. You tried to see her." She cried. "Laura," he said gently, "David is counting on you blaming yourself for everything he creates. I wanted to believe that too, but motherhood has a cruel way of turning even another person's violence into your own guilt." The court process moved slowly. David had money, a reputation, and the perfect grieving father performance. I had a boarding house address, 2 jobs, and a nervous voice that shook whenever a judge asked me a question. David arrived to hearings in pressed suits, with his attorney beside him. He brought typed notes. He brought witnesses from church. He brought a statement from the school saying I had caused distress during dismissal. I brought truth. But truth without proof is often treated like emotion. David's attorney asked why I had left the marital home. I explained. He asked why there were no bruises. I said David was careful. He asked why I had moved to another state. I said I needed work and safety. He asked why I had not taken Rachel with me that night. That question broke me. I tried to answer, but my voice failed. David lowered his head in the courtroom, as if my silence hurt him. Later, Michael told me not to worry, but I saw his face. We were losing. The judge granted temporary full custody to David and ordered supervised visitation to be considered upon further review. Considered. That word became a hallway with no door at the end. I did everything they asked. I attended counseling, though I was not the one who had needed control. I submitted employment records. I provided my address. I gave copies of every letter. I answered humiliating questions about my marriage, my moods, my finances, my family history. I let strangers decide whether my love looked stable enough. Months passed. Then I was granted one supervised visit at a family services office in Columbus. 1 hour. I bought Rachel a small notebook with flowers on the cover because she had loved drawing and writing stories. I wore the same blue dress from the school day, though I had washed it so many times the color had faded. She came in holding David's hand. He knelt before her near the doorway and whispered something. She nodded without looking at me. Then he left the room. A social worker sat in the corner with a clipboard. Rachel stood by the door. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. She did not answer. I held out the notebook. "I brought this for you." She looked at it, but did not take it. "Daddy says I don't have to talk if I don't want to." My throat tightened. "That's true," I said softly. "You don't have to." We sat across from each other at a small table. Between us were crayons, paper, and years of damage already beginning to harden. "I've written to you," I said, "many times." Her eyes flickered. "No, you didn't." "I did. Daddy said you might say that." The room seemed to tilt. "What else did Daddy say?" Her mouth pressed into a line. "He said you left because you were unhappy being a mother." I closed my eyes for 1 second. When I opened them, the social worker was watching me carefully. I knew if I cried too hard, it would be written down. If I sounded angry, it would be written down. If I said David was lying, it might be written down as hostility. So I swallowed my own grief like glass. "Rachel," I said, "being your mother was the best part of my life." She stared at the table. For almost an hour, she barely spoke. But near the end, when the social worker looked down at her notes, Rachel whispered, "Why didn't you come back the next day?" I leaned forward. "I tried." Her eyes lifted to mine. "I tried, baby. I came back. I called. I wrote. I went to your school. I have never stopped trying." For a moment, I saw something soften. Then David opened the door. Rachel's face shut like a window. The visit ended. I was told there would be more. There were not. David's attorney filed objections. He claimed Rachel had nightmares afterward. He claimed I had confused her. He claimed continued contact would harm her emotional well-being. The court delayed, then delayed again. Then years began doing what years do. They moved forward whether I was ready or not. Michael kept helping as long as he could. Sometimes he reduced his fees. Sometimes he accepted payment late. But even good attorneys cannot force a system to care faster than a determined liar can manipulate it. Eventually, the formal fight weakened. Not my love, never that. But the legal fight drained money I did not have and hope I could no longer spend recklessly. Michael advised me to keep records, keep writing, and avoid anything David could use against me. So I became careful, painfully careful. I stopped appearing without notice because every attempt became another weapon in his hands. I stopped calling numbers that no longer worked. I stopped going to the school. I did not stop loving her. Instead, I copied each letter before mailing it. I saved every returned envelope. I kept the flowered notebook she never took. I kept the photograph of her at 5 years old in my purse until the edges softened. Years later, people would ask why I did not fight harder. They never understood. I fought until every door I touched was turned into evidence against me. I fought until my daughter looked at me with fear planted by someone else. I fought until the only way left to love her was to refuse to become the monster David described. So I waited. Not because I gave up, because I believed that one day Rachel would be old enough to ask her own questions. And when that day came, I wanted the truth to still be alive. After David's funeral, I went back to the Ashford Inn and sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the lights. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet. Outside the window, cars moved along the wet street, their headlights sliding across the ceiling like pale ghosts. My black dress felt too tight around my ribs. My shoes hurt. My throat ached from all the words I had swallowed in that church. Rachel's voice kept returning to me. "You abandoned me." Not angry in memory, wounded. That was what broke me most. Beneath all her sharpness, beneath the cold way she had looked at me, my daughter was still an abandoned child trying to make sense of a wound someone else had made. I took the old photograph from my purse and placed it on the nightstand. Rachel at 5. Yellow balloon. Missing tooth. Sunlight on her cheeks. "I came back," I whispered to the picture. "I came back so many times." The words disappeared into the dark. I did not sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Helen Morris standing in the church aisle, her white hair glowing in the stained glass light, saying there were letters in that house. Letters. For decades, I had imagined them destroyed. I had made peace, or something close to peace, with the idea that my written love had vanished into trash bins and locked drawers. But now there was a chance, small, dangerous, almost unbearable, that those letters had survived. And if they had survived, Then maybe my voice had survived too. The next morning, I found Helen's number written on the back of an old church program she had slipped into my hand before I left. I stared at it for almost an hour before calling. She answered on the third ring. "Laura." "Yes." "Oh, honey." Her voice softened. "I hoped you would call." I closed my eyes. "Tell me what you saw." There was a pause, then the sound of a chair creaking. "It was years ago," she said. "Maybe 15 years, maybe more." Frank had already passed by then. David asked me to come over because a pipe had leaked near the upstairs hallway. He wanted to know if water had come through my side of the shared drainage line. I remembered the old houses on Maple Ridge Drive, built close enough that neighbors knew every roof repair, every broken gutter, every late-night argument. "I went upstairs with him," Helen continued. "He pulled down the attic stairs to check the ceiling. There was a wooden box near the opening. It had tipped over probably when he moved things around. Some papers slid out. My grip tightened around the phone. "Envelopes?" I asked. "Yes, dozens of them. Maybe more. Your handwriting was on them." My breath caught. "I saw Rachel's name, Helen," said quietly, over and over. I pressed my hand against my mouth. "I asked him what they were," Helen continued. "He got cold. Not loud, just cold. He said, 'Old family matters.' Then he gathered them up so quickly it frightened me." "That was him," I whispered. "That was always him. I should have done something." "No," I said immediately. "Helen, he fooled everyone. He didn't fool me completely." I opened my eyes. She sighed. "I saw you come back, Laura. I saw you stand across from the school. I saw you sit in your car on Rachel's birthday one year, just looking at the house. I saw David turn the porch light off when he knew you were outside." She sighed. "I saw you come back, Laura. I saw you stand across from the school. I saw you sit in your car on Rachel's birthday one year, just looking at the house. I saw David turn the porch light off when he knew you were outside." Tears slipped down my face. "I thought Rachel knew," Helen said. "I thought she must have known something. Then yesterday in that church I realized she didn't know anything at all." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Helen said, "I'm going to talk to her." Fear shot through me. "Helen, she won't listen." "She may not, but I am old enough now to stop being afraid of an opinion formed by a dead man." I almost laughed, but it turned into a sob. "She hates me," I said. "She hates the person he invented." That sentence stayed with me. Across town, Rachel was walking through her father's house, believing she was handling funeral arrangements, thank you notes, and legal papers. She did not know that grief was about to open a locked room inside her life. Helen called me that afternoon to say she had spoken with Rachel. I sat on the edge of the bed again, holding the phone with both hands. "She came by David's house to meet the estate attorney," Helen said. I waited until the attorney left. "How did she look?" "Tired, angry, like someone holding herself together with wire." "My poor girl. What did you say?" I asked. I told her I knew yesterday was painful. Then I told her there were things about you she had never been told. I closed my eyes. "She didn't take it well," Helen admitted. Of course she didn't. Rachel had carried one version of her life for 32 years. People think truth arrives like light, but sometimes it arrives like an intruder breaking the furniture you arranged your identity around. "She told me not to disrespect her father in his own home," Helen said. "She said you had abandoned her and that David had been the only parent who stayed." I swallowed, and then I told her, "I saw you come back." Silence stretched between us. What did she say? She said I was confused. That hurt more than I expected, maybe because Rachel sounded so much like David in that moment. Helen continued. "Then I told her about the box." My heart pounded. "You did. I had to." I stood without meaning to, pacing the small motel room. "What did she say?" At first, nothing. Then she asked, "What box?" Helen's voice lowered. I told her there was an old wooden box in the attic. I told her I had seen envelopes with her name on them. I told her they looked like letters. I stopped pacing. And Rachel, she got angry again, said if there were letters her father would have given them to her. I closed my eyes. There it was, the loyalty of a daughter who still needed her father to have been good. Helen said, "Then Olivia came downstairs." Olivia heard some of it. I imagined my granddaughter, sharp-eyed and curious, standing in the hallway between the woman who raised her and the truth no one had allowed in. Rachel told her to wait in the car, Helen said. But Olivia asked, "What letters?" A strange, fragile hope stirred in me. Helen continued. That changed something. Rachel didn't want to discuss it in front of her daughter. She told me to leave. My hope sank. But before I left, Helen said, I told her, "Ask yourself why your mother would come to the funeral if she never loved you." I sat back down slowly. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm not done," Helen replied. That evening, Rachel called Helen. Not me. Helen, but still she called. Helen phoned me afterward, breathless. She asked where in the attic. I could not speak. She tried to sound casual, Helen said, but she asked. My hand trembled against the receiver. What did you tell her? The north corner, near the old Christmas decorations. The box had brass hinges. I remembered that box. David's father had given it to us when we first married. It once held tax papers and old warranty booklets. I had not thought of it in years. Laura Helen said gently, I don't know if the letters are still there. I know. He could have moved them. I know. He could have destroyed them after I saw them. I know. But I also knew David. He was not careless with power. If he had kept those letters for years, he might have kept them forever. Not because they meant love to him, because they meant victory. After I hung up, I walked to the motel window and looked out at the darkening street. Somewhere in Columbus, my daughter might be standing beneath the attic door of the house where I had lost her. Somewhere, she might be reaching for the cord that pulled down the stairs. Somewhere, she might be close enough to the truth to touch dust-covered wood. I wanted to call her. I wanted to run to that house. I wanted to stand on the porch and say, Rachel, please. Please look. Please read. Please let my own words tell you what my voice was never allowed to say. But I did nothing. For once, the truth had to reach her without my hands pushing it forward. Because if I pushed, she would resist me. If Helen pushed, she might doubt her. But if Rachel found the letters herself alone in the house of the Father, she trusted, then David's own hiding place would testify against him. The next morning, I packed my suitcase even though I was not leaving yet. Folding clothes gave my hands something to do. At noon, I received a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I thought it was spam. Then I read it. This is Olivia. I'm Rachel's daughter. My mom went into the attic. My knees weakened. A second message came. She found a box. I sat down hard on the bed. The phone blurred in my hand. I typed 3 different replies and deleted them all. Finally, I wrote only, "Is she okay?" The answer came a minute later. No, I don't think so. I pressed the phone against my chest and began to cry. Not because everything was fixed. Nothing was fixed. But after 32 years of silence, something had moved. A door had opened, and my daughter was finally standing on the other side of the lie. I was not in the attic when Rachel found the box, but later, she told me every detail. She told me the house felt different after David's funeral. Not empty, not exactly, haunted. Not by ghosts with footsteps or whispers, but by the weight of everything he had arranged, controlled, labeled, and locked away. His suits still hung in the closet by color. His desk drawer still held pens lined in a perfect row. His appointment calendar still sat open on the kitchen counter, as if he might walk in and complain that someone had moved it. Rachel had gone there that morning, intending to meet the estate attorney and sort through insurance papers. She did not intend to search for me. That was important. Even after Helen's words, even after Olivia asked about the letters, even after doubt had slipped beneath the door of Rachel's mind, she still did not want to believe her father had lied. She told herself Helen was old, confused, maybe guilty for some neighborly misunderstanding from decades before. She told herself I must have manipulated Helen somehow. She told herself anything that would keep David standing where he had always stood in her memory, loyal, wounded, noble. But then Olivia stood in the hallway with her arms crossed and said, "Mom, what if there really are letters?" Rachel snapped, "There aren't." "Then it won't hurt to look." That was how my granddaughter, whom I had never held as a baby, became the first person in that house brave enough to ask for proof. Rachel did not answer her. She walked into the kitchen, washed a clean coffee mug, for no reason dried it, put it away, then opened the cabinet again and took it back out. Olivia waited. Finally, Rachel said, "Fine, we'll look. Then this stops." The attic stairs were in the upstairs hallway near the bathroom, where I used to bathe Rachel in lavender soap. David had painted over the pull cord years ago, so it stuck slightly when Rachel reached for it. Dust fell when the stairs unfolded. Olivia offered to go first. Rachel said no. She climbed slowly, one hand on the railing, the other holding her phone for light. The attic smelled of insulation cardboard and old wood. Summer heat had built up beneath the roof, even though it was only spring. Boxes were stacked in careful rows, most of them labeled in David's handwriting. Tax records, Christmas, Rachel school, fragile. Rachel saw the Christmas decorations first. Plastic wreaths, a carton of ornaments, the angel from the top of the tree wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. Then she saw the north corner. Near the rafters, half hidden behind a folded card table, sat a wooden box with brass hinges. She told me she almost turned around then, not because she believed there was nothing inside, because suddenly she was afraid there was. That is how truth announces itself, sometimes not with certainty, but with terror. Olivia whispered from the attic opening, "Mom, do you see anything?" Rachel did not answer. She moved the card table aside. Dust streaked her black dress. One of David's old suitcases toppled against her leg. She knelt in front of the box and wiped the lid with her sleeve. The brass latch was tarnished, but not locked. Her hands shook when she opened it. At first, she saw papers, old insurance documents, a few photographs, a folded church bulletin from a Christmas service long ago. Then she lifted a stack of manila envelopes and saw my handwriting beneath them. Rachel Carter, my daughter's name, written by my hand, over and over and over. Rachel told me the first sound she made was not a cry. It was a small, sharp breath, like someone had pressed a hand against her chest. She pulled out one envelope, then another, then another. There were birthday cards still sealed, Christmas envelopes, letters written on thin stationery, letters in plain white envelopes, letters with return addresses from Pittsburgh, from apartments I had rented from the diner, where I once received mail because I had no permanent place that felt safe enough. Some envelopes were yellowed at the edges. Some had postal markings. Some were unopened. Some had been slit carefully across the top and placed back inside. But none had reached her. Rachel sat back on her heels. Olivia climbed up, despite being told to wait. "What is it?" she asked. Rachel held out one envelope without looking at her. Olivia read the front. To Rachel Carter, she said softly, "Mom, Rachel grabbed another envelope, then another. She began sorting through them faster as if the truth might change if she moved quickly enough. Then she saw the notes. David's handwriting. Not on every letter, only some. Short, cold instructions scribbled across the back or corner. Do not give her. Hold. Unstable. Return if she asks. And on one envelope, written in the firm black ink, Rachel recognized from grocery lists, school permission slips, and birthday cards signed by her father. Never let Rachel see this. That was the one that broke her. She dropped it as if it had burned her fingers. Olivia whispered. Grandpa wrote that Rachel did not speak. She picked up the envelope again, turning it over, studying the words as if handwriting could somehow belong to someone else if she stared long enough. But it was David's, her father's. The man who had told her I never wrote. The man who had sat beside her on birthdays and let her grieve a silence he manufactured. The man lying in the ground beneath fresh flowers while the evidence of his cruelty sat above his own hallway. Rachel opened the envelope. Inside was a card with pink flowers on the front. A birthday card. Her 12th birthday. She had no memory of receiving a card from me that year. Of course she didn't. She had blown out candles in the backyard while David stood behind her smiling. The card had never been opened. Inside, I had written, My beautiful Rachel, today you are 12 years old. I wonder if you still like chocolate cake with too much frosting. I wonder if you are taller now. I wonder if you still tilt your head when you are thinking. I wish I could see your face today. I wish I could tell you in person that the day you were born was the happiest day of my life. No matter what anyone says, you were never unwanted. You were never forgotten. You were never unloved. Rachel read only that much before the card fell into her lap. Olivia began crying first. Rachel still did not. She sat in the attic surrounded by my letters, frozen in a way grief sometimes freezes the body before the soul can catch up. Then she started opening more. A Christmas letter. A first day of school letter. A letter written after the supervised visit. That one had coffee stains on it because I had cried into the paper before copying it. Rachel read the first lines. My dearest Rachel, today I saw you for 1 hour, and it was both the greatest gift and the sharpest pain of my life. You looked at me like a child trying to remember a song someone told her was dangerous. Rachel covered her mouth. Olivia said, Mom, maybe you should come down. But Rachel kept reading. She read until dust clung to her knees. She read until the attic heat made her dizzy. She read until the father she had known began to split apart from the father revealed by the box. Then she found a bundle tied with twine. Unlike the others, this bundle was not in envelopes. It was a stack of returned letters. My letters, marked in red. Returned to sender. Refused. Undeliverable. Rachel touched the word refused with one finger. She whispered, I didn't refuse them. Olivia said, I know. I didn't. Her voice cracked then. I didn't even know. That was when Rachel finally cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. She bent forward over the box with one hand pressed to her stomach, as if something inside her had physically torn. Olivia wrapped her arms around her mother from the side, and for a moment, my daughter became both a grieving child and a grieving mother at once. Downstairs, David's perfect house stayed silent. No one came to explain. No one came to correct the record. No one came to protect his story. For the first time, Rachel was alone with my words and his handwriting. That was the beginning of the end of his lie. After a while, Olivia helped carry the box downstairs. Rachel placed it on the dining room table where David had hosted holidays, signed school forms, and told stories about my selfishness. The box looked out of place there. Or maybe it looked like it had been waiting for that table all along. Rachel did not call me that day. I did not expect her to. A truth that large does not become a phone call immediately. First, it becomes shock. Then nausea. Then anger. Then memory rearranging itself in the dark. But Olivia texted me. She found a box. Then later, there are so many letters. And then some have his handwriting on them. I sat in my motel room reading each message as if it were a heartbeat returning after years of silence. I wanted to ask which letters. I wanted to ask whether Rachel had read the birthday ones, the school ones, the one where I told her I stood outside her graduation with a newspaper clipping in my purse even though I was too afraid to approach. But I did not ask. This discovery belonged to Rachel now. So I waited. That evening, just after sunset, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it until the final ring, terrified that answering would shatter whatever fragile bridge had begun to appear. Then I pressed the phone to my ear. For several seconds, no one spoke. I knew it was her before she said anything. A mother knows the silence of her child. Then Rachel whispered, barely audible, broken, in a way I had never heard before. How many did you write? My eyes closed. The answer was simple. The answer was impossible. All of them, I said, as many as I could. She inhaled sharply. And then the line went dead. After Rachel hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand until the screen went dark. She had only asked one question. How many did you write? But inside that question was 32 years of birthdays, courtrooms, silence, anger, and a little girl waiting beside a window for a mother she believed had chosen not to come back. I did not call her again. Not because I lacked courage, because I knew Rachel was standing in the middle of a life that had just cracked open. And if I rushed toward her, she might run back toward the lie simply because it was familiar. So, I waited. At David's house, Rachel did not sleep that night either. Olivia told me later that her mother spread the letters across the dining room table in careful rows as if she were trying to build a timeline out of grief. Birthday letters on one side, Christmas letters on another, returned envelopes stacked near the edge, cards still sealed, cards opened by David, cards marked with his handwriting. Rachel moved through them slowly at first, then frantically, then slowly again. She kept picking up the same envelopes, checking the dates, comparing postmarks, reading my return addresses. Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Akron. Pittsburgh again. Every address was proof that I had been alive, working, moving, surviving. Not gone, not vanished, not free, trying. Olivia sat across from her with a notebook and wrote dates down because Rachel's hands shook too much to hold a pen. "Mom," Olivia said, "you don't have to read all of them tonight." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't." Rachel looked at her daughter then, and Olivia told me later that her eyes were so red she barely looked like herself. "If I stop," Rachel whispered, "you'll have to feel it." So she kept reading. The letter that finally undid her was not the oldest one. It was not the one marked, "Never let Rachel see this." It was not even the first birthday card. It was the letter I wrote on her 10th birthday. That confused Rachel at first because I had still been living in the house when she turned 10. The envelope was dated months later, after I had been forced out, but inside, I had written about the birthday we had spent together before everything fell apart. My dearest Rachel, today I keep thinking about your 10th birthday. You wore the yellow sweater with the little white buttons, and you asked for pancakes shaped like stars. I burned the first batch, and you laughed so hard that milk came out of your nose. You told me it was the best birthday breakfast ever because mistake pancakes taste funnier. Rachel stopped reading there. She remembered. Not the whole morning, not clearly, but enough. The yellow sweater, the burned pancakes, the way I had tried to cut them into stars and made them look more like broken flowers. For years, she had believed her memories of me were unreliable. David had taught her that. Whenever she remembered something tender, he explained it away. You were little. You wanted her to be better than she was. You're remembering what you wished happened. But that letter had details no stranger could invent. No absent woman could fake. Rachel continued reading. I remember how you leaned against me while we washed dishes and you said, Mommy, when I'm big, I'm going to have a yellow kitchen. I told you that you could have any color kitchen you wanted. You said, then I'll have yellow because it feels like morning. Rachel looked up from the paper. Her kitchen in her own home was yellow. She had painted it yellow after marrying Mark, though she had never fully understood why that color made her feel safe. Olivia whispered, Mom. Rachel pressed the letter against her chest and shook her head as if she could push back the realization. Then she read the next paragraph. A few weeks ago, I stood across the street from your school. I saw you come out wearing your green jacket. I wanted to run to you. I wanted to hold you until all the lies fell away. But when I called your name, they took you back inside, and I was told I was frightening you. Baby, if you were frightened, I am sorry. I have never wanted fear to touch you. I only wanted you to know I came. That was when Rachel's memory shifted. She saw it again. A school afternoon. A woman in a blue dress. Her own small voice saying, Mommy. The principal stepping in front of her. A teacher guiding her backward. David arriving later, kneeling in front of her, saying, Your mother is not well. She may say things that confuse you. Daddy is protecting you. Rachel had buried that memory beneath the story he repeated afterward. Mommy came to scare you. Mommy tried to take you. Mommy is angry because we are safe without her. But the letter told the other half. I came. I was stopped. I still loved you. Rachel began to cry so hard that Olivia came around the table and held her shoulders. I saw her, Rachel kept saying. I saw her. I remembered T. Hat. He told me I imagined it wrong. I still loved you. Rachel began to cry so hard that Olivia came around the table and held her shoulders. I saw her, Rachel kept saying. I saw her. I remembered that. He told me I imagined it wrong. Olivia cried with her. There are few pains sharper than realizing your own memories were not false, only stolen from you and returned with someone else's meaning attached. Rachel kept reading through tears. I wish I could tell you this in person. Nothing about loving you has ever been difficult. Missing you is what hurts. Being kept from you is what hurts. But loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done. That sentence broke something in her that David had spent decades hardening. Because all her life, Rachel had been told she was too much for me, too needy, too emotional, too inconvenient. David had turned my absence into a mirror that made her feel unwanted. Now my own handwriting said the opposite. She was not hard to love. She had been easy to love. Always. Sometime after midnight, Rachel found another envelope tucked behind the bundle. It had never been mailed. This one was not addressed to her. It was addressed to David. My handwriting again. She hesitated before opening it. Olivia said, Maybe don't. Rachel opened it anyway. David, I am asking you one parent to another. Please stop using Rachel's fear to punish me. Let her have my letters. Let her know I did not leave her. You can hate me for the rest of your life if you need to, but do not make our daughter carry that hatred for you. She deserves both truth and peace." Rachel read the lines twice. Then she turned the page over. At the bottom in David's handwriting were 4 words. "She deserves my protection. Not truth, not peace, protection." That was how he had justified everything. Rachel stood so abruptly that the chair scraped backward and hit the wall. "He knew," she said. Olivia looked frightened. "Mom." He knew what he was doing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't him thinking I was safer. He knew she was writing. He knew she wanted me to know. Her voice rose. He let me hate her. For the first time since finding the box, Rachel was not only grieving, she was angry. Not at me, at him. And that anger terrified her because David was dead. There was no face to confront, no voice to challenge, no courtroom where she could place the evidence on a table and demand an answer. So she did the only thing she could do. She walked through the house and looked at every room differently. The kitchen, where he made birthday pancakes after I disappeared. The living room, where he accepted sympathy. The staircase where he had once blocked a crying little girl from running to her mother. The hallway beneath the attic, where he had hidden my love directly above her head. For 32 years, Rachel had lived beneath those letters. That thought nearly destroyed her. At dawn, she returned to the dining room and picked up the 10th birthday letter again. She folded it carefully, placed it back in its envelope, then took it out again because she could not bear to hide it. Olivia made coffee. Neither of them drank. Around 7, Rachel picked up her phone. She did not call me. Not yet. She typed a message, erased it, typed again, erased again. Finally, she wrote, "I read the birthday letter. I saw you at school, didn't I?" When my phone buzzed in the motel room, I had been sitting by the window, still awake, watching morning light turn the parking lot silver. I read her message and covered my mouth. My hands trembled as I typed back. "Yes, I saw you. You were wearing your green jacket. I called your name. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again." Then Rachel wrote, "He told me you came to scare me." I closed my eyes. I wanted to say what David was. I wanted to pour 32 years of truth into that little glowing screen. But this was not the moment for my anger. So I wrote, "I came because I missed you." A long pause followed. "Then I don't know what to do with this." I answered honestly, "Neither do I." That was the first honest conversation my daughter and I had shared in more than 3 decades. Not warm, not healed, not easy, but honest. And after so many years of lies, honesty felt like the first breath after being held underwater. Rachel spent the next day reading the letters she had been denied for most of her life. She did not read them in order at first. Pain does not always follow a timeline. She picked up whichever envelope her hand found, opened it, read a few lines, then had to put it down because one sentence could carry more weight than an entire year of believing the wrong thing. Olivia stayed with her. My granddaughter, 17 years old, and wiser than any child should have to be made toast, Rachel did not eat. She brought water. Rachel forgot to drink. She answered the phone when relatives called about flowers and funeral cards telling them her mother was resting. But Rachel was not resting. She was meeting the woman David had buried alive inside his lies. Me. By late afternoon, she had sorted the letters into piles by year. On the dining room table, my motherhood was laid out in paper form. Here was the year I worked 2 jobs. Here was the year Rachel started high school. Here was the year I wrote from a new apartment because the boarding house had been sold. Here was the year I stopped writing every week and began writing only on birthdays and holidays. Not because I loved her less, but because every returned envelope felt like another wound David could use against both of us. Then Rachel found the final letter. The envelope was different, thicker, cream-colored. No postmark, no stamp. At first, she thought it was another letter addressed to David, but when she turned it over, she saw her name written in my hand. Rachel Ann Carter. Not just Rachel, her full name. The name I had whispered the first time a nurse placed her in my arms. She opened it slowly. Inside were 6 pages. At the top, I had written, "My dearest Rachel, this may be the last letter I send for a while, but please do not mistake silence for forgetting." Rachel told me later that she stopped right there and pressed the paper flat with both hands because she could feel something terrible coming. I remembered writing that letter. I remembered the apartment where I wrote it, the cracked kitchen window, the smell of coffee gone cold, the legal documents spread beside me like a language designed to exhaust love. I remembered sitting there until sunrise, knowing that mailing that letter might be the last act of contact I could attempt without making David punish Rachel further. At that time, Rachel was 15, old enough to understand absence, still too young to understand manipulation. The letter said, "I came to Columbus last week. I did not come to frighten you. I did not come to disrupt your life. I came because your birthday was close, and I wanted to see that you were safe and growing and still yourself. I parked down the street from the library because I remembered you loved that place when you were little." Rachel remembered the library. She remembered being 15, walking out with a stack of books against her chest, feeling suddenly watched. She had turned her head and seen a blue Ford across the street. She had not seen my face clearly, but David had. The letter continued, "Your father saw me before you did. He crossed the street and told me that if I kept appearing, he would request permission to move you out of Ohio. He said he had already spoken to his attorney. He said he could make the court believe I was unstable again. He said every time I came near you, I was making your life harder." Rachel's hand began to shake. Olivia sat beside her, but did not interrupt. I had written, I wanted to fight him right there on the sidewalk. I wanted to scream that no father who loves his child should use her as a shield. But then I looked through the library window and saw you laughing with a friend. You were wearing a denim jacket. Your hair was longer. You looked peaceful for one moment, and I realized he still had the power to take that peace and blame me for it. Rachel whispered, "I remember that jacket." Then she kept reading. "He told me if I loved you, I would stop confusing you. He told me you cried after visits, that you had nightmares, that you were finally healing from the damage I caused. I do not know how much of that is true and how much is another story he built. But I know this, I will not allow my love for you to become the weapon he uses to hurt you." That was the sentence that changed everything. For 32 years, Rachel had believed my silence was proof I had chosen a life without her. But there it was in my own hand. My silence had been surrender only on the outside. Inside, it had been a mother deciding that if David would punish Rachel for every attempt I made, then the only way left to protect her was to step back far enough that he could not use my presence as a battlefield. Rachel read the next line aloud, though her voice broke halfway through. "So, if I must love you from a distance for now, I will. Not because I want distance, not because I accept his lies, but because I would rather carry the pain myself than make you carry more." Olivia covered her mouth. Rachel bent over the paper and cried in a way that frightened her daughter. Not the tears of a woman who had found a sad letter. The tears of a daughter, realizing that the person she hated had been protecting her in the only broken way left. She kept reading. "Please remember, if this letter ever reaches you someday, that silence can be forced. Absence can be arranged, A mother can be pushed so far away that her love becomes invisible to the child who needs it most. But invisible love is not dead love. Rachel touched the page like it was something alive. The final paragraph was short. I do not know when I will see you again. I do not know what he will tell you. I do not know whether you will grow up believing I left you because it was easier than staying. But I need you to know this truth exists somewhere, even if only on paper I stayed as long as I could. I fought as long as I could. And when fighting began to hurt you, I stepped back with a broken heart. I love you, Rachel. I have loved you every day of your life. If you ever need me, I will come. Rachel read the last sentence again and again. If you ever need me, I will come. Then she looked around David's dining room. The polished table, the framed photographs, the clean walls, the respectable life. All of it suddenly looked like a stage set built over a trapdoor. She stood up and walked to the mantel where a photograph of David and Rachel at her college graduation still sat. In the picture, Rachel was smiling proudly in her cap and gown. David had one arm around her, his face full of fatherly devotion. Behind that picture, tucked against the wall, was a small stack of folded papers. Rachel had never noticed them before. She pulled them out. They were copies of old legal notes, maybe placed there temporarily and forgotten. David's handwriting appeared on one page, neat and deliberate. L continues to send letters. Attorney says not useful unless she escalates. Keep all materials. Do not destroy. Rachel felt cold. Keep all materials. Do not destroy. That was why the letters survived. Not guilt, not sentiment, evidence. David had kept my love like ammunition, waiting for some future moment when he might need to prove I was obsessive, unstable, unable to move on. Rachel's grief turned into something sharper. She was no longer only asking, why didn't my mother come back? She was asking, what kind of father lets his child suffer so he can win? That night, Rachel did not call me. Instead, she placed the final letter in a plastic sleeve from David's office supplies. Then she did the same with the note that said, never let Rachel see this. Then with the page that said, keep all materials. Do not destroy. Olivia watched silently. Finally, she asked Mom, what are you going to do? Never let Rachel see this. Then with the page that said, keep all materials. Do not destroy. Olivia watched silently. Finally, she asked, Mom, what are you going to do? Rachel looked at the dining room table covered in 32 years of stolen love. I don't know yet, she said, but I know I was wrong about her. Her voice cracked on the word, her. Olivia reached for her hand. Rachel looked toward the ceiling, toward the attic, where the truth had waited above her head for decades. Then she whispered something I would not hear until later. She didn't abandon me. Olivia squeezed her hand. Rachel said it again, this time through tears. She didn't abandon me. And in that house, where David had trained silence to serve him, the truth finally had a voice. The next morning, Rachel went looking for proof beyond the letters. Not because she still doubted me entirely, because part of her needed to know how far David had gone. Letters could be hidden by a cruel man. Notes could be explained away by fear or pride or anger. But legal papers were different. Court records had dates. Attorneys had files. Statements had signatures. If David had lied there too, then Rachel knew she would no longer be facing one terrible secret. She would be facing a lifetime built on fraud. David kept his important documents in the den. I remembered that room too well. It had dark wood shelves, a locked file cabinet, and a green banker's lamp on the desk. When I was married to him, David never liked me touching anything in there. He called it business, but the truth was simpler. It was control with a door. Rachel had spent her whole life seeing that den as sacred. Her father's office, his quiet place, the room where he paid bills, planned vacations, signed permission slips, and kept family papers organized. Now she stood in the doorway and felt sick. Olivia followed her in quietly. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked. Rachel nodded. The file cabinet key was in David's top drawer, exactly where he had always kept it. That almost made Rachel laugh. He had hidden my letters in an attic, but he had trusted his own house so completely that he left the key to his secrets within arm's reach. The first drawer held tax returns. The second held insurance files. The third held Rachel's school records neatly labeled by year. The fourth drawer stuck halfway open. Rachel pulled harder. Inside were folders marked with names she did not recognize at first. Reed Michael, custody. Laura, visitation. Her hands went cold. She lifted the folder marked Laura and placed it on the desk. Inside were copies of court petitions, statements, attorney notes, and letters from Michael Reed. Rachel recognized my name printed over and over in legal language that made pain sound clinical. Petitioner requests visitation. Respondent alleges emotional instability. Mother states she did not voluntarily abandon minor child. Mother has provided written correspondence. Mother alleges interference with contact. Rachel sank into David's leather chair. Her father had told her there had been no real custody fight. He told her I had made a little noise at first, then disappeared when things became inconvenient. He said the court had seen through me quickly. He said I did not care enough to continue. But the folder told another story. I had filed, I had appeared, I had requested visits, I had submitted letters, I had been denied, delayed, challenged, and pushed back through channels Rachel had never known existed. Olivia picked up a page and read aloud, her voice trembling. Mrs. Carter has provided copies of weekly letters mailed to the minor child at the marital residence. Respondent denies receiving such correspondence. Rachel looked at the dining room where the box of letters still sat. He denied receiving them, Olivia whispered. But he had them. Rachel did not answer. She opened another folder. This one contained David's notes to his attorney. Some were typed, some handwritten. L. Likely to appear emotional in court. Emphasize instability. School incident useful. Do not allow unsupervised contact until narrative is established. Narrative. That word stopped Rachel. Narrative. Not safety. Not truth. Narrative. Rachel placed the paper down as if it were contaminated. For a moment, she could not breathe. She had spent her childhood inside that narrative. She had cried inside it, hated me inside it, defended him inside it, built her entire understanding of family inside it. And David had known it was a story. She opened the folder marked Visitation. There was a report from the supervised visit when she was a child. Rachel remembered pieces of that day. Now the small room, the crayons, the woman in the corner with a clipboard, my blue dress, the flowered notebook. The report described me as tearful but appropriate. Appropriate. Rachel touched the word. David had told her I had behaved erratically. He said I had confused her. He said the visit proved I was not healthy enough to be in her life, but the official report did not say that. It said I brought a gift. It said I spoke softly. It said Rachel appeared guarded but responsive near the end. It said I told her I loved her and did not pressure physical contact. Then Rachel found David's objection filed afterward. He had claimed she suffered nightmares. He claimed she cried for hours. He claimed she feared being taken away. Rachel stared at the claims and tried to remember. Had she had nightmares? Maybe. Had she cried? Yes. But not because I frightened her. Because David had spent days before and after that visit telling her she should be afraid. Rachel pressed her fingers to her temples. "Oh, God," she whispered. "He used my own tears against her." Olivia knelt beside the chair. "Mom, you were a kid. I believed him. You were a kid. I hated her." Olivia's eyes filled. "You were a kid." Rachel looked at her daughter then, and something about Olivia's face pushed the knife deeper. She imagined someone stealing Olivia from her, then teaching Olivia that her mother had chosen to disappear. She imagined living long enough to see her child look at her with disgust for a crime she had never committed. That was when Rachel finally understood me not as a story, not as a name, not as the woman at the funeral, as a mother, a real mother, a mother like her. She stood abruptly and reached for the phone book David still kept in the desk drawer, though nobody used phone books anymore. Then she searched online for Michael Reed. He was retired now, living outside Harrisburg, but his old law office number forwarded to a small legal consulting firm. Rachel left a message with a voice that shook so badly, Olivia had to write down what she wanted to say. Less than an hour later, Michael called back. Rachel put him on speaker. "This is Michael Reed," he said. "How can I help you?" Rachel swallowed. "Mr. Reed, my name is Rachel Carter." Silence, then a quiet inhale. "Rachel," he said softly. "Laura's daughter, Laura's daughter. Not David's daughter. Laura's daughter." Rachel closed her eyes. "Yes." Another pause. "I've wondered for many years if you would ever call." Rachel gripped the edge of the desk. "Did my mother try to see me?" Michael did not answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice had aged, but remained steady. "Yes," he said. "Many times." Rachel covered her mouth. Olivia reached for her hand. Michael continued. "Your mother fought harder than most people could have survived. She wrote, she filed, she documented everything. She came to hearings even when she had barely enough money for the bus. She never gave up on you, Rachel. But your father made every attempt look dangerous." Rachel began to cry silently. "Did you believe her?" she asked. "Yes. Then why didn't anyone stop him?" Michael sighed, and in that sigh was the exhaustion of a man who had spent his life watching truth arrive without enough power behind it. "Because belief and proof are not always the same thing in court," he said, "and because your father was careful. He had money, reputation, and composure. Your mother had fear, grief, and no bruises anyone could photograph." Rachel bowed her head. "He said she left." "I know." "He said she stopped trying." "He lied." The word landed in the room like thunder. He lied. No softening, no polite explanation, no protecting the dead. Michael Reed, after 3 decades, finally said plainly what had shaped all our lives. Rachel whispered, "I found the letters." Michael's voice changed. "He kept them." "Yes, all of them. Dozens, maybe more. Some opened, some marked with his handwriting." There was a long silence. Then Michael said, "Rachel, your mother kept copies too." Rachel went still. "She did, yes. She kept everything. Copies, receipts, returned envelopes, notes. She always hoped one day you would ask." Rachel looked toward the dining room table. "One day you would ask." That was when the guilt hit her fully. Not guilt for being a child, guilt for being an adult who had never asked. For every year after 18, when she could have searched, called, wondered, doubted. For every Thanksgiving, she toasted David as the parent who stayed. For every time, she told Olivia that her grandmother was not part of our lives for a reason. Michael seemed to sense where her mind had gone. "Rachel," he said gently, "you were raised inside a lie. Don't punish yourself for not finding the door sooner." She pressed her palm to her forehead. "What do I do now?" "That depends," Michael said. "Do you want justice against a dead man, or do you want truth with the living?" Rachel looked at Olivia, then at the letters, then at David's files. "I want my mother to know I know," she whispered. Michael's voice softened. "Then start there." After the call ended, Rachel sat in the den for a long time. The room that had once represented David's order now looked like a crime scene of the heart. She gathered the most important papers, the visitation report, David's notes, the attorney memo, the handwritten instruction to keep the letters. She placed them beside the box. Then she opened a blank sheet of paper. For several minutes, she only stared at it. Finally, Olivia said, "Are you writing to her?" Rachel nodded. "What are you going to say?" Rachel picked up a pen, but her hand trembled. "I don't know how to apologize for 32 years. Olivia stood behind her and rested her chin on her mother's shoulder. "Start with one sentence." Rachel looked at the blank page. Then she wrote, "Mom, I found the truth." The word Mom blurred beneath her tears. It was the first time she had written that word to me since childhood. And even though I did not know it yet, that single word had already begun bringing my daughter home. Rachel did not come to the Ashford Inn immediately. For 2 days, she stayed inside David's house with the letters, the legal papers, and the kind of grief that does not know where to place itself. She texted me only 3 times. The first message said I found court papers. The second said, "Michael Reed told me you tried." The third came late at night. "I don't know how to face you." I stared at that last message for a long time. There were so many answers I could have given. "You don't have to be afraid. I have waited my whole life. Just come." But every sentence felt too heavy, too eager, too likely to make her feel cornered. So I wrote back the only thing I knew was true. "I am here when you are ready." Then I placed the phone on the nightstand and cried quietly into the pillow, because hope, after 32 years, is not soft. It hurts when it returns. On the 3rd afternoon, there was a knock at my motel room door. Not loud, not confident, 3 small knocks. I knew before I opened it. My hand shook on the latch. For a moment, I stood there with my forehead against the door trying to breathe. I was 69 years old, but in that second, I felt like the young mother standing outside Maple Ridge Drive in the rain, waiting for someone to let me back into my own life. Then I opened the door. Rachel stood in the hallway. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and no makeup. Her face was pale. Her eyes were swollen. In her arms, she held the wooden box. Behind her stood Olivia carrying a folder against her chest. For a long moment, no one spoke. Rachel looked at me as if she were seeing 2 people at once, the woman she had hated and the mother she was beginning to remember. I wanted to reach for her. I did not. I had learned long ago what it meant to love without grabbing. "Hi," I said. It was such a small word for such a large moment. Rachel's mouth trembled. "Hi." I stepped back. "You can come in." She walked into the room slowly, like she was entering a place where something sacred or terrible might happen. Olivia followed and stood near the window. Rachel placed the wooden box on the small round table by the bed. The sound of it touching the tabletop made my knees weaken. There it was. The box that had held my stolen voice. The box that had sat above my daughter's head while she grew up believing I had chosen silence. Rachel looked down at it. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know." She shook her head quickly. "No, I really didn't know. I thought I knew. I thought I understood everything. I thought you left, and Dad stayed, and that was the whole story." I nodded, though every word scraped against old wounds. Rachel opened the box with trembling fingers and took out one envelope. The 10th birthday letter. "I read this one first," she said. "Not first, but it was the first one that made me remember." I looked at the envelope and saw my own younger handwriting. The loops were neater then. My hands had not yet become stiff with age. Rachel unfolded the letter. "I want to read something," she said. "You don't have to." "I do." Olivia wiped her face and turned toward the window, giving us what privacy she could in a room too small for all our grief. Rachel began reading. "Nothing about loving you has ever been difficult. Missing you is what hurts. Being kept from you is what hurts. But loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." Her voice broke before she reached the final word. I closed my eyes. I remembered writing that sentence at a kitchen table in Pittsburgh. My hand cramped my chest, aching, wondering whether any part of me would survive if Rachel never knew. Rachel lowered the paper. "I believed I was hard to love," she said. I opened my eyes. Her face had crumpled in a way that made her look 11 again. He made me believe that, not directly all the time. Just enough. He said you were overwhelmed, that you wanted freedom, that some women weren't meant to be mothers. And when I was little, I thought maybe I cried too much. Maybe I needed too much. Maybe that was why you left. I shook my head, tears already falling. "No, Rachel." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "No, baby, never." You were my joy. You were the reason I stayed as long as I did. You were the reason I fought after I left. You were never too much. You were never hard to love. A sound came out of her, then half sob, half breath. "I hated you," she whispered. "I know. I said awful things about you. I know. At the funeral, I told you that you didn't get to cry." My lips trembled. "You were grieving. I was cruel. You were hurt." She looked at me desperately, almost angrily. "Don't make it easy for me." That stopped me. Rachel clutched the letter in both hands. "Please, don't just forgive me like it didn't happen. I need to feel the weight of what I did. I need to know I'm not just walking in here and getting comfort after treating you like a stranger." I took a slow breath. For 32 years, I had dreamed of holding my daughter again. I had imagined forgiveness as something simple because longing makes reunions look cleaner than real life allows. But she was right. Healing could not be built on pretending pain had not happened. So I sat on the edge of the bed and told the truth. "It hurt," I said. Every word hurt. Not just at the funeral. For years, knowing you believed I left you hurt me in places I did not know a person could hurt and keep living. Rachel cried silently, but I continued. "I never blamed the child David lied to. And I am trying very hard not to blame the woman who had to find the truth after the man who raised her was already gone." She sank into the chair beside the table. "I don't know who he was anymore. That is a terrible thing to discover. He was my dad. I know. He was good to me sometimes. I believe that. She looked surprised. I swallowed. People like David are not cruel every minute. If they were, no one would stay. No one would believe them. I know he loved having you. I also know he used you to punish me. Both things can be true, and that is what makes it so hard. Rachel covered her face. Olivia came to her then, placing one hand on her shoulder. "Mom," she whispered. Rachel reached up and held her daughter's hand. For a moment, I watched them together and felt the strange ache of seeing what I had missed. My daughter as a mother. My granddaughter comforting her. A whole life that had grown without me. Rachel seemed to read that ache on my face. "I'm sorry you didn't know her," she said, looking at Olivia. Olivia turned toward me, tears on her cheeks. "I'm sorry too." Those words nearly broke me. "You don't owe me an apology, sweetheart. I called you the grandmother who left once," Olivia said, voice shaking. "When I was little. Mom told me that was why we didn't see you." Rachel flinched. "I did," she whispered. "I said that. I understand, I said, though, understanding did not make it painless." Rachel took another letter from the box, then another. She laid them between us like pieces of a bridge. "I brought the legal papers too," she said. "The visitation report, Dad's notes, the ones where he wrote about the narrative." Her mouth twisted around the word. "I thought maybe you'd want them." I looked at the folder in Olivia's arms. For years, I had wanted proof. I had begged for it, chased it, saved scraps of it in shoeboxes. Now it sat in a motel room, too late to change the past, but not too late to tell the truth. "Thank you," I said. Rachel stared at the floor. Then she whispered, "Mom." The word filled the room. Not Laura. Not this woman. Not my father's ex-wife. Mom. My hand flew to my mouth. Rachel looked up at me, terrified by the power of what she had just said. "Can I call you that?" she asked. I could not answer at first. I had waited 32 years to hear that word in her adult voice. 32 years of birthdays, unanswered letters, courtrooms, motel rooms, and nights when I thought grief would stop my heart. Finally, I nodded. "You can always call me that." Rachel stood. This time I stood too. She took one step toward me, then stopped. Her face folded in on itself. "I don't know how to hug you," she said. I opened my arms slowly. "Then we'll learn." She came to me like someone walking through fire. When my daughter finally fell into my arms, she did not feel like the child I had lost. She felt like a grown woman carrying that child inside her. Both of them exhausted, both of them asking whether love could survive what lies had done. I held her carefully at first, then tightly. Rachel sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom." I pressed my face against her hair. "I know," I whispered. "I know." Olivia cried openly behind us. Outside, traffic moved past the motel. Somewhere, a maid's cart rattled down the hallway. The world continued in ordinary sounds, unaware that inside room 214, 32 years of silence had finally broken. I did not feel victory. I did not feel triumph. I felt my daughter's arms around me, and for that moment, that was enough. Healing did not arrive the way I once imagined it would. For many years, during the loneliest nights of my life, I had pictured a reunion as one perfect moment. Rachel running into my arms, both of us crying, every lie dissolving, as if love alone could repair what had been broken. But real healing is not a single embrace. It is the morning after. It is two people sitting across from each other, unsure what to say after the tears dry. It is realizing that truth can open the door, but it cannot instantly rebuild the house. Rachel stayed at the Ashford Inn for almost 3 hours that first day. We talked until our voices grew quiet and the room turned golden with late afternoon light. Then she left with Olivia, promising to call me that evening. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the middle of the motel room and felt both full and emptied out. My daughter had hugged me, my daughter had called me mom, and still I went to bed alone that night. That is the strange cruelty of lost years. Even when the person returns, time does not. It remains missing like a room sealed behind brick. Rachel did call that evening. At first, neither of us knew how to begin. I answered, "Hello." She said, "It's me." Me. Such a simple word, such a fragile bridge. "I'm glad you called," I said. "I said I would." There was a pause. Then she added quickly, "I don't mean that coldly. I don't want to make promises and fail them." "I understand." She exhaled. "Do you?" "Yes," I said. "More than you know." That first call lasted 19 minutes. We talked about small things because large things were still too sharp to hold continuously. She asked where I lived now. I told her about my little apartment outside Harrisburg, the plants on my windowsill, the neighbor who left zucchini at everyone's door in August. She told me about Olivia's school, about her husband Mark, about the bookstore where she worked part-time after years of staying home with her children. "You work in a bookstore?" I asked. "Yes." "You loved books as a child." She went quiet. "I did. You used to sleep with them under your pillow." A soft sound came through the phone. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. "I still do that sometimes," she said. The next day she came back alone. No box this time, no folder. Just Rachel holding 2 paper cups of coffee from a cafe down the street. "I didn't know how you take it," she said, standing in my doorway. "Cream, no sugar." She looked down at the cup in her right hand. "Good, I guessed." That small thing moved me more than it should have. My daughter had guessed how I liked my coffee. After 32 years, it felt like being known in the smallest possible way. We sat by the window and drank coffee that had already gone lukewarm. Rachel stared at her cup. "I need to tell you something ugly." I set mine down. "Okay. When I was pregnant with Olivia, I used to think about you a lot." My breath caught. "Not kindly," she said quickly. I was angry, terrified too. I kept thinking, how does a mother leave? How does someone carry a child and then walk away? And after Olivia was born, I got angrier, because I loved her so much that I thought it proved you must not have loved me. I closed my eyes briefly. That must have hurt. "It made me hard," Rachel said. "Mark would ask if I wanted to find you and I'd say no. I told him there was nothing to find. I told Olivia that my mother wasn't part of our lives because she chose not to be." She looked at me then, her eyes wet. I passed his lie down to my daughter. There it was. The wound beneath the wound. David had not only stolen me from Rachel. He had shaped how Rachel mothered, how she explained abandonment, how she guarded her own child against a woman who had been waiting in the dark with open arms. I reached across the small table, not all the way, just enough to give her a choice. Rachel looked at my hand, then she took it. "Lies travel through families," I said. "So does truth." She squeezed my fingers. "I don't know how to undo it. You start by not hiding it anymore. That afternoon, we talked about years. Not all at once. That would have been impossible. But we began placing pieces on the table between us. She told me about middle school, about pretending Mother's Day did not matter. She told me how she once tore up an assignment called A Woman I Admire because she wanted to write about me, but believed she had no right to miss me. I told her about Pittsburgh, about the boarding house, about Mrs. Bennett teaching me peach cobbler. I told her about the diner, about saving tips in a jar, about buying a used blue Ford, because I needed to feel like I could move toward her if the chance came. Rachel cried when I told her I had kept her kindergarten drawing of a rainbow. You still have it? Yes. All this time? She covered her face. I did not tell her to stop crying. Tears are sometimes the body returning what it was forced to store. Over the next week, we met every day, sometimes at the motel, sometimes at a quiet park near the Scioto River. Once Rachel drove me past Maple Ridge Drive. I did not ask her to. She simply pulled over across the street from the old house and turned off the engine. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The house looked smaller than it had in my nightmares. The green shutters were gone, replaced with black ones. The tulips I had planted decades earlier were no longer there. The porch had been repainted, but I could still see myself standing in the rain. Rachel gripped the steering wheel. I used to look out that upstairs window, she said. After you left, I thought maybe if I watched long enough you'd come back. I did come back. I know that now. She turned toward me, and her face crumpled. But the little girl inside me doesn't know what to do with that. She waited for you, and you came, but she didn't get to know. How do I forgive that? You may never forgive all of it. She looked surprised. I continued. Forgiveness is not pretending something was less cruel than it was. What your father did was cruel. To you too. Her eyes filled. I miss him, she whispered. I know. I hate him. I know. How can both be true? Because he was your father, I said, and because he hurt you. Rachel leaned back against the seat, crying silently. I wanted to protect her from that contradiction, but I could not. Some truths must be grieved in layers. Olivia joined us for dinner 2 nights later. She chose a small family restaurant with red vinyl booths and too many pie options. She sat across from me, shy at first, then slowly curious. So she said, stirring her iced tea, "What was my mom like when she was little?" Rachel groaned softly. "Oh no," I smiled. "She talked to squirrels." Olivia's eyes widened. She what? She believed they understood her. She used to leave them crackers and tell them family secrets. For the first time since the funeral, Rachel laughed. A real laugh. It startled all 3 of us. Then Olivia laughed too, and I sat there watching my daughter and granddaughter share joy across a table, feeling both gratitude and grief so intertwined I could not separate them. Later that evening, Rachel walked me back to my motel room. At the door, she hesitated. "I want you to come to my house before you leave Ohio." My heart skipped. "Are you sure?" "No," she said honestly. "But I want it anyway." "When tomorrow?" I nodded. Then she added, "Mark wants to meet you, and Olivia wants to show you her room, and I want to show you the yellow kitchen." The yellow kitchen. The one born from a memory David had not managed to destroy. The next afternoon, I stood inside Rachel's home. Not David's house. Hers. There were family photos on the wall, books on side tables, a quilt over the couch. Mark greeted me gently with kind eyes and no forced warmth. Olivia showed me her room, her art, her messy desk, and the stack of novels beside her bed. Then Rachel led me into the kitchen. Yellow walls, soft, buttery yellow. Morning yellow. She stood beside the counter, nervous. "I didn't remember why I wanted this color," she said. Not until the letter. I touched the wall lightly. In that moment, I understood something that helped me breathe. David had taken so much, but he had not taken everything. Somewhere inside Rachel, beneath lies and grief and years of anger, a child had remembered that yellow felt like morning, and morning after all that darkness had finally come. Rachel chose a Sunday afternoon to read the letters aloud. Not in David's house. She told me she could not let the truth be spoken for the first time in the same dining room where he had hidden it for decades. So she invited us to her yellow kitchen, where sunlight came through white curtains and warmed the table like a blessing. Mark was there. Olivia was there. Helen Morris came too, leaning on a cane, wearing a pale blue cardigan, and the quiet expression of someone who had waited too long to see wrong made right. I sat beside Rachel, not across from her. That was her choice. I don't want you on the other side of the table anymore, she said. Those words nearly made me cry before the reading even began. On the table lay the wooden box, the legal folder, and 5 letters Rachel had chosen. She had not chosen the cruelest evidence. Not the notes where David wrote, "Never let Rachel see this." Not the court papers. Not the returned envelopes stamped refused. She chose love, a birthday letter, a Christmas letter, the letter after the school incident, the final letter, and one new letter she had written to me. Before she began, Rachel stood at the head of the table with both hands resting on the back of a chair. She looked nervous, but steady. I grew up believing my mother left me, she said. No one moved. I repeated that story because I trusted the person who told it to me. I told my husband. I told my daughter. I told myself so many times that it became part of who I was. Her voice shook. Then she looked at me. But it wasn't true. The room went silent in a way that felt holy. Rachel picked up the birthday letter, the one about the yellow birthday letter, the one about the yellow kitchen and the mistake pancakes. She read it slowly. When she reached the line about yellow feeling like morning, Olivia smiled through tears and looked around the kitchen walls. So that's why you kitchen and the mistake pancakes. She read it slowly. When she reached the line about yellow feeling like morning, Olivia smiled through tears and looked around the kitchen walls. So that's why, Olivia whispered. Rachel laughed softly, crying at the same time. That's why. Then she read the Christmas letter. My dearest Rachel, if the house is quiet tonight and you feel lonely, please know there is a woman in Pittsburgh looking at the same winter sky and loving you with everything she has left. Mark lowered his head. Helen pressed a tissue to her mouth. I looked down at my hands because hearing my old words in Rachel's voice felt like time folding back on itself. Next came the school letter. Rachel's voice broke harder there. I came because I missed you. I left because they told me my presence frightened you. But please, believe me, baby, I was never trying to take peace from your life. I was trying to find my way back into it. Rachel stopped reading. Olivia stood and hugged her from the side. For a moment, mother and daughter held each other while I watched. I did not feel jealousy. I felt wonder. My daughter had become a mother who could be held by her child and still keep standing. Rachel finished the final letter last. When she read the line, "If you ever need me, I will come," her voice gave out completely. I reached for her hand. She held on. Then Rachel picked up a folded paper I had not seen before. This one is mine, she said. She looked directly at me. Mom! I spent most of my life angry at a woman I did not know because I was taught that anger was easier than grief. I thought hating you protected me from missing you. But the truth is, I missed you anyway. I missed you in every Mother's Day card. I never wrote every question I was afraid to ask every time Olivia laughed, and I wondered whether I had once laughed like that with you. I covered my mouth. Rachel continued, I cannot give you back the years Dad stole. I cannot give myself back the childhood I lost. I cannot make one apology large enough for 32 years. But I can tell the truth now. I can say you were not the mother who left. You were the mother who wrote. You were the mother who came back. You were the mother who loved me from a distance, when distance was the only place he could not punish me for being loved. Tears fell freely down her face. Then she said the words I had waited a lifetime to hear. I'm sorry, Mom. I stood. She stood too. This time there was no hesitation. She came into my arms and I held her in front of everyone. Not as proof, not as performance, but as peace. Helen began to cry. Mark wiped his eyes. Olivia wrapped her arms around both of us, and for the first time in my life, I stood in my daughter's kitchen with 3 generations of women holding one another against the damage one man's lies had caused. Later, Rachel placed the letters in a new box. Not David's wooden box. A white archival box Olivia had bought with acid-free folders and late Ed bought with acid-free folders and labels written in Rachel's own hand. Letters from Mom. Truth records. Family healing. She handed me a folder too. Inside was a blank sheet of stationery. I thought maybe Abel's written in Rachel's own hand. Letters from Mom. Truth. Records. Family healing. She handed me a folder too. Inside was a blank sheet of stationery. I thought maybe she said shyly we could write new letters. Not because we're apart, just because letters brought us back. So we sat at the yellow kitchen table and wrote. Rachel wrote to Olivia about truth. Olivia wrote to her future children about asking questions. I wrote to Rachel. My dearest Rachel, today I sat beside you while you read my old letters aloud. For 32 years I thought my words had vanished. But love has a strange way of surviving locked boxes, closed doors, and people determined to bury it. You found me in those pages, but I want you to know something I found you too. When I finished, Rachel read it silently. Then she folded it and held it against her heart. That evening, before I left, she walked me to the porch. The sky was turning pink over the quiet street. Olivia and Mark were inside packing leftovers. Helen had already gone home smiling like a woman who had finally seen justice arrive late but alive. Rachel stood beside me, hands tucked into her sweater sleeves. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I. I'm scared we'll mess it up. We might. She looked at me surprised. I smiled gently. Families do, but now we can tell the truth when we do. She nodded. Then very softly she said, Good night, Mom. Not broken this time, not frightened, just natural, as if the word had finally found its way home. Good night, sweetheart, I said. Driving back to my motel, I did not feel that everything had been restored. It had not. There were still missing birthdays, missing school plays, missing ordinary mornings we would never get back. But something sacred had been returned. Not the past, the truth. And sometimes truth is the first piece of ground strong enough to build a future on.